So, folks, we have to talk about Jeffrey Epstein. And I want to start out here by highlighting what I think is a particularly impressive speech on the Senate floor that took place 5 days ago. And this was done by Sheldon Whitehouse in an effort to put into the record the connections between Donald Trump, Russia, and Jeffrey Epstein. Now, a lot of this is going to be stuff that you have heard before or know of, but I haven't really ever seen it laid out quite as clearly and quite as succinctly as this. I think it's pretty worth your time. And Sheldon Whitehouse does sound like a fake name. It does sound like a name that one might come up with on the spot while, on a tour of Washington, D.C. with a fan group of the hit television show Young Sheldon. My name is Sheldon Whitehouse. Sheldon Whitehouse is my name. And painting houses is my game.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President.
I have sped this up because it's like roughly an hour-long speech, and I want to get through it a bit. He's a bit of a slow talker, too.
It was the spring of 2019. Public and media interest in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report into Russia's election interference operation reached a fever pitch. There had been a steady drip, drip, drip of reporting on the Trump team's cozy and peculiar relationship with Russia since his surprise election victory in 2016. Ahead of the Mueller report's release, Trump's Attorney General, Bill Barr, issued a letter.
Yeah, for the record, this is at 1.5 speed, so if it does get too fast, we can slow it down a little bit and still be sped up. But I think the 1.5 speed is good for this.
To Congress purporting to summarize the report's findings. The letter declared that Russia and the Trump campaign did not collude to steal the election. The press, ravenous for any news of the long-anticipated Mueller report's conclusion, largely accepted Attorney General Barr's narrow, carefully worded conclusion, and not yet having access to the full report, blasted the Attorney General's summary around the world.
Now, I want you to keep in mind, Bill Barr did this. Bill Barr issued this summary, because it's going to be really important for what he's about to talk about.
Trump himself declared, all caps, no collusion. He said he'd been cleared of the Russia hoax, a term he reserves only.
Okay, clearly some of you don't believe me that it's at 1.5 speed. This is the normal speed.
To describe things that are true, like climate change. Frustrated, Mueller wrote to Barr that the Attorney General's letter did not fully capture the context, nature, and substance of the investigation. But by the time the dense, voluminous Mueller report was issued, the month after Barr's letter, its message had been obscured. The Mueller report actually concluded that the Trump campaign knew of and welcomed Russian interference and expected to benefit from it. That conclusion was later echoed and reinforced by an investigation led by then Chairman Marco Rubio's Senate Intelligence Committee, a bipartisan report. But Barr's scheme had largely worked. Many in the media and in the Democratic Party seemed to internalize that the Russia speculation had perhaps gotten out of hand, and that perhaps we had been wrong to believe there was a troubling connection between Trump and Russia after all.
And the fact that he has to read this into the record because Donald Trump has been so successful, along with the complicity of the mainstream media, into making it seem like, oh, they never found anything bad about me in Russia, when that's absolutely not what the report said. And I talked about this at the time when this report came out. We all knew that he was full of shit on this one.
But were we? Let's take a look at a sampling of what Trump has done for Russia just lately, and usually at the expense of American interests. There are many, but here's a top 10. 1. After Trump and Vice President Vance theatrically chastised the heroic Ukrainian President Zelensky in front of TV cameras in the Oval Office last year, Trump paused our weapons shipments to Ukraine. 2, in July, during the worst Russian bombing campaign of the war until that point, Trump paused an already funded weapons shipment for Ukraine, including the Patriot interceptors that protect civilians from Putin's savage attacks. 3, that same month, Trump's Treasury Department stopped imposing new sanctions and closing sanctions loopholes, effectively allowing dummy corporations to send funds, chips, and military equipment to Russia. Leaked phone calls show that White House envoy Steve Witkoff and Putin envoy Kirill Dmitriev.
Hey, White House envoy Witkoff. Hey, you don't think that's the same guy we were talking about lying on national television in order to provide cover for the war in Iran right now? The same Steve Witkoff who advised us to go to war against Iran because they opened negotiations from a strong position? That Steve Witkoff? That's crazy.
Have worked together closely behind the scenes on a peace deal favorable to Russia. 5, last summer, Trump rolled out the presidential red carpet for the Russian dictator on American soil, with a summit in Alaska that yielded, unsurprisingly, no gains toward ending the war in Ukraine. 6, Trump's vice president traveled to the Munich Security Conference last year to parrot Russia's anti-Western talking points, pushed by right-wing groups that Putin has long funded and used to create political strife in Europe. 7, Trump installed Russia apologist Tulsi Gabbard as his director of national intelligence, much to the glee of Russian state media. 8, upon the confirmation of Trump's Attorney General Pam Bondi, the Department of Justice shuttered its anti-kleptocracy work that had successfully targeted Putin's Russian oligarchs. 9, late last year, Trump unveiled a new so-called national security strategy, which abandoned traditional alliances in Europe and favored a transactional foreign policy that the Kremlin praised as, quote, largely consistent with Moscow's vision and desires. And 10, the Trump administration is even paving the way for Russia's return to global sports competition, ending its isolation in those arenas in the wake of the hostile Ukraine invasion.
It is very strange how often sports come up
doping programs
from Republicans.
In Russia. That's a top 10, but the list goes on. If Trump were purposefully doing Russia's bidding, it is hard to see what he would be doing differently. The United States is the most powerful nation in the world. Russia is a weak, corrupt regime. My old friend Senator John McCain used to say that Russia is a gas station run by gangsters with an army. It doesn't make sense that the President of the United States, who insists on being dominant in essentially every relationship, is so submissive to one person. And that one person is Russia's dictator, Vladimir Putin. So what is it about Trump and Russia?
Now, this is like, I know that a lot of us knew about these events that he just described, right? Which are all a matter of historical record. We know these things. But where he goes next, I find very interesting.
And could it have any connection with Trump's close friendship with the deceased pedophile Jeffrey Epstein? Much about Epstein remains unknown, but the survivors who have come forward and the millions of emails released through the bipartisan Epstein Files Transparency Act have shed some light on the operation of the late financier's global pedophile ring. And over, it touches Russia. When recently asked by a reporter about the Epstein files, Trump said in part, "It's just a Russia hoax." Again, hoax, the word he uses for when something is true. But the most telling part is that Trump's mind, asked about Epstein, immediately went to Russia. Russia. I should start by pointing out that Epstein's ties to foreign intelligence—
Oh, Sheldon Whitehouse is a Democrat.
—may never be fully known. It's a murky world. He had links to officials in the United States, Russian and Israeli governments, and many others. But it's worth looking
Jeffrey Epstein, the high school teacher?
at those ties to Russia, a nation so hostile to the United States.
I did see that Salmon Moose.
Epstein's
yeah.
career began in the mid-1970s at the prestigious Dalton School in New York City, where despite dropping out of college, 21-year-old Jeffrey Epstein was given a position teaching high school mathematics to the children of some of New York's wealthiest families. Perhaps of note, the outgoing headmaster at the time of Epstein's hire was Donald Barr, the father of future Attorney General Bill Barr.
Oh, that's interesting. And I had not heard that before. Jeffrey Epstein was hired at a school by Bill Barr's dad. I hadn't heard that part before, and I found that very interesting. The same Bill Barr who went on to say there were absolutely no connections between Donald Trump and Russia. That's very strange, isn't it?
And a former intelligence officer during World War II. The elder Barr was known for making unconventional hires at Dalton.
Huh. Oh, also, Bill Barr's dad was a former intelligence officer. What about that? That's so strange. I know that part isn't new to some people. It's new to me. I found it interesting, which is why I thought that this speech would be interesting, because it lays it all out very succinctly.
After a couple of years, Epstein was able to leverage the elite connections he made at Dalton to a job at Wall Street investment bank Bear Stearns, where he rose quickly through the company. However, after getting caught fabricating his resume, using the company credit card on expensive gifts for his girlfriend, and ultimately providing privileged stock information to a girlfriend, among other unscrupulous behaviors, Epstein called it quits and started his own financial firm. Those early scams were just the start. Shortly thereafter, Epstein fell in with a wealthy man named Douglas Leese, a British...
I don't believe there's any new information in this speech outside of putting it all together in this package, which I think is worthwhile for a lot of folks who are not following this super closely.
Defense contractor with connections in the arms industry and the British government. During this period, Epstein would tell people he was a bounty hunter who tracked down hidden money. According to Stephen Hoffenberg, a former business mentor of Epstein's, who went to prison for a massive Ponzi scheme that he later said Epstein had designed, Leese introduced Epstein to Robert Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell, who became Epstein's girlfriend and sex trafficking accomplice after her father's death, was Robert Maxwell's favorite daughter, and he involved her deeply in his work. An opportunist in pursuit of wealth, the Czechoslovak-born Robert Maxwell had complex, shifting ties to British, Soviet, and Israeli intelligence. Initially bankrolled by MI6, he accepted secret payments from the KGB through his Soviet-friendly publishing company, and was the rare individual who traversed both sides of the Iron Curtain. In 1992, the British newspaper, the Sunday Express, wrote that a secret document signed by the head of the KGB months before Maxwell's death at sea showed that Maxwell was a political and intelligence asset for the Soviet Union. The newspaper claimed that the document indicated Soviet leadership had instructed the KGB to protect Maxwell's reputation and business activities. Maxwell's UK Foreign Office file, released more than a decade after his death, described him as, I'm quoting here, a thoroughly bad character and almost certainly financed by Russia. Journalist Vicky Ward wrote the following in Rolling Stone magazine in 2021. She said, Hoffenberg told me that Epstein had said he'd worked on several projects with Robert Maxwell, including solving Maxwell's debt issues. The word debt is in quotes. Maxwell died in 1991 under very strange circumstances, apparently having fallen off his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, in the middle of the night. And it was discovered in the aftermath that he'd stolen hundreds of millions of dollars from the pensions of his employees.
Oh yeah, he just fell off his boat in the middle of the night, as one does.
The story continued. Epstein had also told Hoffenberg that via...
I do think it's heavily implied here, and I don't have any proof of this, obviously, but it is heavily implied that, like, someone, perhaps Epstein himself, set up Maxwell to be killed.
Maxwell and Leese, he was involved in something that Hoffenberg described as national security issues, which he says involved blackmail, influence trading, trading information at a level that is very serious and dangerous. The story concluded, 4 separate sources told me on the record that Epstein's dealings in the arms world in the 1980s had led him to work for multiple governments, including the Israelis. End quote. Epstein's strategies for making money and working intelligence contacts seem to have some similarities to Robert Maxwell. For the record, Epstein, a profligate liar, once told Ward that he never met Robert Maxwell or Lease. At some point in the 1980s, Epstein struck up a friendship with a fellow brash New York businessman by the name of Donald Trump. Author Michael Wolff has said of Trump and Epstein, they shared everything. They shared their airplanes. They shared women between them. They shared constantly business and financial advice. End quote. There are many photos of the two men together on the New York and Palm Beach party circuits throughout the 1990s. Trump now famously said in 2002, I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. Alan Dershowitz told the New York Times in 2019 that in those days, if you didn't know Trump and you didn't know Epstein, you were a nobody. Dershowitz is the well-known lawyer who served both on Epstein's defense team when he was charged with having sex with minors back in 2006, and on Trump's impeachment defense team in 2020. The president of Trump's Atlantic City Trump Plaza Hotel in the late 1980s said he saw Trump and Epstein together so frequently that he believed Epstein was Trump's best friend. That same man described an incident where Trump brought Epstein and a 19-year-old girl to the casino gaming floor.
Well, wait. He's trying hard to tie Jeffrey Epstein to Russia based on guilt by association when his ties to Israel are so blatant. No, I think what he's doing is trying to tie Epstein to Maxwell's contacts. Essentially, Epstein inherited Maxwell's contacts with Israel, Russia, and the United States. And so I think that that's where this is going, right? Like, I think the entire point here is to show how Donald Trump is mixed up in this too. 203 has to be on the soundboard. What is this?
Thank you.
Oh, this interview is great. What is this?
So hot. I can't wait to have your cock in my mouth.
I thought this was a different John Kennedy quote. I gotta be honest, I was not expecting that one. I thought it was the John Kennedy quotes from today. Oh no. Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 2 tier 1 subs. Oh god. Alright, moving on.
Epstein once took a model to Trump Tower, where she says Trump groped her while laughing with Epstein. She remarked that it seemed like a twisted game between the two men. One survivor says Epstein summoned her to his offices late one night. Trump soon arrived, and according to the New York Times, she recalled feeling scared as Mr. Trump stared at her bare legs. Then Mr. Epstein entered the room, and she recalled him saying to Mr. Trump, no, she's not here for you. After the men left the room, she said she overheard Trump commenting that he thought she was 16 years old.
Yeah.
In 1992, Trump hosted a calendar girls competition at Mar-a-Lago for dozens of young women. The event organizer was appalled to learn that Trump and Epstein would be the only men present, a private showing. During Maxwell's trial, one of Epstein's victims said he took her to meet Trump at Mar-a-Lago when she was 14. Maxwell recruited 16-year-old Virginia Giuffre from the spa at Mar-a-Lago. Giuffre was abused by Epstein and trafficked to other men in Epstein's orbit. Trump said in 2025, I think Giuffre worked at the spa. He stole her, he being Epstein. In 1997, the UK tabloid The Daily Mirror, formerly owned by Robert Maxwell, claimed that Trump was dating a 20-year-old British model and that Ghislaine Maxwell had introduced them at a party. The tabloid notes, Trump met the model at a party in Manhattan. Several American millionaires already had their eyes on the model, but she was there with Robert Maxwell's daughter Ghislaine, who has introduced several of her attractive friends to the property developer, Trump. According to the Mirror, after their meeting, Trump flew Madam Maxwell and the model south to the Sunshine State, where they enjoyed a happy weekend together. When they returned to New York, the model was installed in one of Donald's many apartments there. In an interview with BBC Newsnight, the model stated, Ghislaine Maxwell did introduce me to him, that is Trump, and she introduced me to him with a clear message of my being with him, in the same way that she had trafficked me and brought me to Jeffrey Epstein, end quote. She also said, I can only speak for myself, and this is in no way to negate any other experience that anyone else might have had with him, but at no time did President Trump behave with any impropriety with me. The same woman accused Epstein of sexually abusing her when she was a teenager in a 2019 interview with NBC. From NBC, I'm quoting, the abuse spanned several years and locales. In addition to the estate on his private island, she said Epstein preyed on her at his homes in New York and Paris. According to Craig Unger's book, American Compromat, and I'm quoting here, Trump was often the center of Maxwell's attention, and women who entered Trump's orbit sometimes ended up being associated with both Trump and Epstein, spending part of their time living in a Trump Tower condo and part in Florida at Mar-a-Lago or one of Epstein's homes. Among them was a Russian model and beauty pageant contestant whose journey from the world of beauty pageants and modeling to Trump's Mar-a-Lago and Epstein's island retreat is highly suggestive in terms of how Epstein and his associates began manipulating young women. The story continues. In the early 90s, before coming to the United States, the woman had placed well in a number of beauty pageants, coming in second in Miss Russia, 1993, and winning the 1994 Miss Baltic Sea title that year. In 1995, she left Moscow, spent 6 weeks learning English in St. Petersburg, that's St. Petersburg, Florida, not Russia, and was profiled in the Tampa Tribune as reigning Miss Russia. And before long, she met Donald Trump. Quoting here, notwithstanding the fact that Trump was still married to his second wife, Marla Maples, the woman moved into a 30th floor condo in Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue. There, according to an item in the New York Post, her lavish accommodations were taken care of courtesy of an unidentified sugar daddy. She spent time with both Trump and Epstein. Flight logs released by a federal judge in New York in 2019 showed that in February 1999, the woman, then 27, flew on board Epstein's Gulfstream, the so-called Lolita Express, with Maxwell and Prince Andrew from Epstein's Little St. James, aka Pedophile Island, back to Florida, end quote. Trump has tried to distance himself from his former friend, the monstrous pedophile who is believed to have abused at least 1,000 women and girls. It's worth taking a look at how the friendship between Trump and Epstein allegedly soured. There are varying accounts as to whether Trump ever banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago over his recruitment of spa workers from the resort. But we know the falling out was at least in part related to a bidding war between Trump and Epstein over a Palm Beach mansion in 2004. Trump won and purchased the property for $41.3 million. Just 4 years later, and after modest renovations, Trump sold the mansion to billionaire Russian oligarch Dmitry Rybolovlev for $95 million. At the time, it was reported to be the most expensive residential property sale in United States history. Pretty stellar investment for Mr. Trump. The oligarch, for his part, after paying the $95 million, never even moved in. Which brings us back to Russia. Epstein claimed to have given at least some insight on Trump to the Russians. Epstein met on many occasions with Vitaly Churkin, Russia's representative to the United Nations from 2006 until Churkin's death in 2017. Epstein wrote in an email, Churkin was great. He understood Trump after our conversations. It is not complex. He must be seen to get something. It's that simple, end quote. Epstein wrote in 2018 to Thorbjorn Jagland, a former prime minister of Norway, who was then head of the Council of Europe, I'm quoting here, I think you might suggest to Putin that Lavrov can get insight on talking to me. That appears to be a reference to Sergei Lavrov, Russia's Minister of Foreign Affairs. The email was sent prior to the Helsinki summit between Trump and Putin. In another email to Jagland, Epstein wrote that he wanted to help Putin and Russia reinvent the financial system. A 2017 FBI report, based on a confidential human source, claims that Epstein was President Vladimir Putin's wealth manager, end quote. Epstein tried several times to meet with Putin, often via Jagland, although it is unclear if any such meeting took place. But Putin is named almost 1,000 times in the latest tranche of Epstein file documents, and there are almost 10,000 references in the documents to Moscow. Epstein roped many Russian and East European girls and women into his trafficking operation. The New York Magazine profile of Epstein, published all the way back in 2002, reads, indeed, at a party at Maxwell's house, her friends say, one is just as apt to see Russian ladies of the night as one is to see Prince Andrew, end quote. In Ward's 2003 profile of Epstein, a guest described a, quote, cocktail party thrown by Maxwell that Prince Andrew attended, which was filled, she says, with young Russian models. In a 2010 email, Epstein suggested a young woman as a dinner companion to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the former prince, assuring him that she was, and I'm quoting here, Russian, beautiful, and trustworthy, end quote. The Daily Beast recently reported on an alleged classified U.S. intelligence document claiming that, and I'm quoting here, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was drawn into Moscow's orbit thanks to his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, which the Kremlin allegedly used as a route into the British establishment. In another 2010 email to a person whose name has been redacted, Epstein wrote, and I'm quoting here, tomorrow I'm organizing a dinner for some new Russian girls. See you at 10. He received an email from a redacted sender in 2012 that read, I have 2 Russian girls for you to meet, one 21, another 24. A message left for Epstein by one of his employees in 2005 claims that French model scout Jean-Luc Brunel had found a, quote, teacher who could give Epstein, quote, free lessons. Quote, he has a teacher for you to teach how to speak Russian. She is 2 times 8 years old, not blonde, end quote. 2 times 8 years old.
Ew.
According to American Compromat,
Ew.
in addition to whatever legitimate careers
Ew.
Brunel may have fostered, as a model scout, he also allegedly hired scouters to identify, procure, and transport underage girls, many 15 years of age and under, hire them to give, quote, massages, and traffic them.
Also, note the prevalence of Russian girls. I think, again, Sheldon Whitehouse is setting forth a bunch of breadcrumbs to essentially set up his conclusion, which is essentially that the Russian government was sending girls to Jeffrey Epstein to be placed with men of means and status in order to collect information about them, make contact with various people in high levels of various governments, etc. And so, like, it seems like that his argument is that Epstein functioned as essentially a honeypot nexus for the rich and the powerful, and Russia used him accordingly. Describing a person's age as 2 times 8 makes my skin crawl. It's genuinely disgusting. I feel nauseous.
Brunel was found hanged in his French jail cell in 2022 after being arrested on rape and sex trafficking charges. Bill Gates said he had affairs with 2 Russian women, which Epstein later discovered. Somewhere along the way, Epstein struck up a relationship with Sergei Belyakov, Russia's former deputy minister of economic development and a graduate of the FSB, Russia's intelligence academy.
Interesting.
Epstein introduced him to contacts like Peter Thiel, the tech billionaire, who would go on to give $10 million to the super PAC that helped elect now Vice President J.D. Vance to the Senate in 2022. In 2015...
Isn't it interesting how this all comes back around to, like, Jeffrey Epstein's introducing his, former Russian intelligence officer friend to Peter Thiel, and then Peter Thiel is going on to, like, back the Senate bid of J.D. Vance. It is an interesting chain of events, I gotta say.
Epstein warned Belyakov that, I'm quoting here, a Russian girl from Moscow is attempting to blackmail a group of powerful businessmen in New York, end quote. It was, Epstein said, quoting again, bad for business for everyone involved. Belyakov responded back with information about the woman, who he said worked in the sex and escort business. The FSB Academy graduate said he would meet with someone who knows her. The following year, Belyakov told Epstein that he had a new position at the Russian Direct Investment Fund, the Russian sovereign wealth fund headed by current Putin envoy Kirill Dmitriev, the same guy who was caught in those friendly leaked phone calls with Steve Witkoff that I mentioned earlier. Masha Drakova, a former spokesperson for Nashi, the pro-Kremlin youth movement, was in regular touch with Epstein in the last couple of years before his death in prison. She was ostensibly helping Epstein with his public relations. According to the Washington Post, she was, quote, the subject of the 2011 documentary Putin's Kiss, whose title refers to a widely publicized award ceremony in which he received a medal from Putin and spontaneously kissed him on the cheek.
It's amazing we gave time to refuting Pizzagate when Epstein existed in 2015.
Right? Sometimes it really does feel like conservatives can say just about anything and like turn it into a just deranged witch hunt like Pizzagate. But on the left, we struggle with the reality of situations. Like, we have actual crimes being committed right in front of our faces all the time, and yet we cannot muster even a small fraction of the dedication that Pizzagate was able to. It's crazy.
End quote. In a 2017 email, Drakova asked Epstein to connect her with adequate Russian oligarchs. The Post reported in 2022 that her fundraising pitches highlighted her ties to wealthy Russians, although Drakova denied writing those emails and said she did not receive Russian funding. Epstein advised Drakova as she launched her Silicon Valley venture capital firm, and she introduced Epstein to the contacts she had made in the tech world. In one emailed interaction in 2017, Drakova, after claiming to meet billionaire Jeff Bezos, tells Epstein she is, quote, trying to understand what she is not understanding about him, end quote. Epstein writes back that Bezos is, quote, smart, funny, and visionary. He's a very nice person, probably, mistyped, but obviously means probably, the best in the valley among the bees. The files also indicate that Epstein had dealings with Oleg Deripaska, a Russian billionaire who the Treasury Department has identified as a money launderer for Vladimir Putin. Deripaska also cultivated a friendship with Peter Mandelson, a senior figure in Britain's Labour Party. It appears that Mandelson tried to use Deripaska's contacts to acquire a last-minute Russian visa for Epstein in 2010. Correspondence also shows Epstein's assistant trying to set up a meeting for Epstein and Deripaska in Moscow or Paris. There's also audio of Epstein advising then Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak to have dinner with Putin to line up work after he leaves government. There is at least one itinerary for a lengthy trip across Russia, and photos of Epstein and Ghislaine in what is believed to be Russia, including with people who appear to be Russian soldiers. Umar Jabrailov, a former Russian senator who committed suicide in recent days, described Maxwell as a soulmate. Epstein had a series of Russian visas between 2011 and his death in 2019. Epstein's crimes left a long money trail, and that trail winds back to Russia. Ranking member of the Finance Committee Ron Wyden has doggedly sought the truth about Epstein's transactions with Russian banks and Eastern European entities. One suspicious activity report, filed by J.P. Morgan Chase after Epstein's death, shows that between 2003 and 2019, Epstein conducted 4,725 wire transactions totaling over $1 billion. And that's just one bank. Epstein used multiple banks. According to J.P. Morgan Chase, the wire activity was flagged for the suspicious activity report for being, and I quote, consistent with alleged sex trafficking of minors and for involving, quote, the high-risk jurisdiction of the Russian Federation, end quote. CNN notes that two accounts, including in the suspicious activity report, were linked to now-sanctioned Russian banks Alfa Bank and Sberbank. Also named in the suspicious activity reports, Maxwell, associated entities like Brunel's MC2 Model Management, and various women and girls. Let's go back to the journalist Vicky Ward. Sources who range from former arms dealers to former spies, and also Hoffenberg, suggest that Epstein, who lacked any sort of moral compass, decided to compromise influential people by recording them doing things they wouldn't want made public. And once he got out of jail in the last 10 years of his life, Epstein bragged to various people, including journalists, that he was advising a whole assortment of foreign leaders who included Vladimir Putin, Mohammed bin Zayed, Mohammed bin Salman, various African dictators, Israel, the British, and of course the Americans. He also told several of the same people he was making a fortune out of arms, drugs, and diamonds. I'm still reading the same quote. He was known in the intelligence world as a hyper-fixer, somebody who can go between different cultures and networks. Epstein was, of course, known for his parties, which he insisted on hosting in his various mansions, where he could completely control the environment.
Yeah, so essentially, Sheldon Whitehouse is here saying this man was effectively an asset for about a dozen different countries and world leaders, and was known to their intelligence systems and would set them up with other powerful people, as a, just Absolutely none. And I do want to say, I do think it's weird that White House is not really talking that much about, like, Epstein's connections with Israel. For example, his very long-running relationship with Ehud Barak. We played a video of this maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago of Ehud Barak, like, chatting with Jeffrey Epstein, and Epstein's like trying to introduce Ehud Barak to Peter Thiel. Like it is a wild video clip from one of their conversations. He had a long running relationship with Ehud Barak, and it seems like it's way more extensive as you begin to like look into the relationships between the Israeli government and Epstein. It just seems strange to me that there's a lot of emphasis being placed on Russia here when, like, White House openly admits right here that, like, he had relationships with about a dozen different countries. It's not just Russia. It's also Israel.
Many of Epstein's victims have said they believe they were recorded. Virginia Giuffre wrote in her posthumous memoir that Epstein had a huge library of videotapes and a room in his New York home where monitors displayed real-time surveillance footage from his properties. Quote, he explicitly talked about using me and what I'd been forced to do with certain men as a form of blackmail, so these men would owe him favors, she wrote. Another survivor said Epstein once walked her through his mansion, pointing out pinhole-sized cameras. He boasted that they were in every room. According to Epstein's emails, in 2014, he directed a staffer to procure hidden cameras, which were installed in tissue boxes. The New York Times obtained photos of the interior of Epstein's New York mansion, which show a camera installed near the ceiling of the master bedroom, and another along the molding of an adjoining room. The Times also spotted cameras near a suite of bathrooms on the same floor as Epstein's bedroom. When police searched his Palm Beach home in 2005, they, quote, located 2 covert, paren, hidden, close paren, cameras, end quote. Both cameras were located inside clocks, one by a desk and the other in the garage. It's worth noting that Epstein often seemed to get tipped off in advance as to when the Palm Beach police would be dropping by. Epstein is said to have once told an ex-girlfriend, I collect people. I own people. I can damage people. The disgraced financier Hoffenberg allegedly claimed to the National Enquirer in a final account before his death that, quote, wherever Epstein was entertaining, he and Ghislaine were taping. That report was only released last summer, as Hoffenberg had asked the Enquirer not to publish his comments until 3 years after his death. According to the Daily Beast, the former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, Alex Acosta, is once said to have claimed Epstein, quote, belonged to intelligence, and that the decision to let him off easy in 2008 was made above his pay grade. The Prime Minister of Poland, a country that has extensive experience with Russian intelligence operations, has opened an investigation into potential links between Epstein and Russian intelligence. Prime Minister Tusk said, more and more leads, more and more information, and more commentary in the global press all relate to the suspicion that this unprecedented pedophilia scandal was co-organized by Russian intelligence services. According to alleged anonymous intelligence sources published in the British tabloid The Daily Mail last month, some believe, and I'm quoting here, Jeffrey Epstein was running the world's largest honey trap operation on behalf of the KGB when he procured women for his network of associates, end quote.
There it is. But also, what's interesting is that there's an email that Jeffrey Epstein sent that's in the Epstein files where he points a finger. Remember Maxwell, Robert Maxwell, talked about at the beginning of this speech? Epstein, in this email, seems to believe that Robert Maxwell was attempting to extort Mossad for around 400 million pounds in order to save his own company, and was threatening to expose Mossad secrets if they did not give it to him, which then appears to have culminated in his death. At least that is what Epstein believed as of, a year or so before his death. A year or so before Epstein's death.
I want to stress that we don't have answers here. Epstein was an inveterate liar and a criminal who often sought to exaggerate his own power and influence. And the Epstein files need to be viewed through that lens. He could have been working with an intelligence agency or several intelligence agencies. He could have just been what the Russians call a useful idiot. We may never know. What we do know is that a significant number of powerful men, our current president, some of his cabinet secretaries, tech billionaires like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and others, were very mixed up with Epstein at different times. And Epstein seems to have been very mixed up with Russia. We also know that there is a cover-up afoot at the Department of Justice. The MAGA Department of Justice is trying to shield Trump from something in the Epstein files. We know that documents in the files about President Trump that should be released have not been released. The missing files, first discovered by independent journalist Roger Sollenberger, are alleged to detail claims by an Epstein accuser who said she was also sexually assaulted by President Trump when she was a young teenager. One of the great forces that Washington runs on is normalcy bias. It's often in the interest of the bureaucratic establishment to look skeptically towards outlandish or extreme stories, because in most cases the truth is more ordinary than what may first appear. What I've done here today is lay out the facts as documented by the many brave survivors who have come forward at great personal risk, as well as by the many journalists who have tried and continue to try to get to the truth. As a lawyer, I know that you can prove cases with circumstantial evidence. You don't always need the smoking gun. Here, we have links with Russia, girls from Russia, money from Russia, people from Russia, deals and transactions with Russia, contacts with people with Russian intelligence, news reports exploring contacts with Russia, and an official investigation from the government of Poland into an Epstein-Russia connection. Sometimes, with a little imagination, you have the chance to see what's right in front of your face. And Mr. President, I'd like to ask unanimous consent that this document, which is a bibliography of all of the sources.
I don't know why they would cover up his Russia KGB ties. Well, because I don't think that, I don't think it always necessarily works that way, right? Like, it's not always, hello, we are the KGB. We would like to make you into our honeypot expert. Like, instead it goes, oh yeah, this guy I know. Yeah, he's pretty cool. You need girls? I know girls. I can get you girls. And it's just, it winds up being less of an explicit, you are a spy for Russia, and more a, wow, a bunch of really useful Russians are making themselves available to me. I'm not going to ask questions about it, because I suspect where they might be coming from, but they're really useful, and I prefer not to know. I think that's kind of more where this is on that spectrum.
I quoted from in this speech to be made a part of the record and appended at the conclusion of my remarks. Without objection, then, I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum. Clerk will call the roll.
Nice. We did it. We made it through the entire thing. And I think I think it was worth our time. Because it's worth noting throughout all of this that, despite the fact that there is a lot of stuff we still don't know, these are significant and interesting connections. They are, if they are coincidental, they are incredibly coincidental. Okay? And on top of that, this is a case where, there are actual spies at play. There are actual intelligence services at play. Not just Russia. Notably, also, Epstein was connected to Israeli military intelligence through an individual named Yoni Koren, who would regularly stay at Epstein's house, and who Epstein paid for his cancer treatment. So Epstein was a spy. I don't think he was a spy. I don't think it's as oh, he was on the payroll. I think he probably saw what happened to Robert Maxwell and said, I don't want to deal with that. Instead, I'll just be very useful to anyone who comes to my doorstep. And so I think he was just very useful in a particular set of ways to multiple different administrations and governments, and was able to do them favors and then be owed favors in return. Yeah, I think a better description is what Snugan is saying. He was an asset, not an operative. Yeah. he was, he was doing his own independent entrepreneurial thing, but was all too happy to make that business available to unscrupulous and dubious individuals in high positions of power around the world. I believe that that's closer to the reality. Yeah, Epstein was a free agent with leanings towards certain groups. Yes. Thank you guys for being articulate, as the hour is late and I am losing my ability to be quite as articulate as I would like to be. But we go over all of this because on top of that, you also have what is currently unfolding here in America, which, for example, this is a story from last week. The DOJ admits 4,763 Epstein files, including Trump allegations, were removed, meaning that they had a bunch of allegations and a bunch of files related to Donald Trump, and they took those out specifically to protect Donald Trump. Now, of course, there was an absolute holy hell raised over this, and thankfully, NPR was able to notice this and was able to facilitate the release of some of these documents. And NPR's investigation previously found 53 pages that appeared to be missing from the public database. Because in addition to these documents that were missing, NPR noticed that in the released files, there were 53 documents that were simply gone. Like, these documents all have numbers on them, and NPR noticed that there were numbers skipped between several of these documents, in a pile of millions and millions of piles, right? Or millions and millions of documents. They noticed these numbers being skipped. So they discovered 53 pages were missing. Now, after they discovered this, 16 of those pages were released. And it's pretty interesting, right? Because these files that were missing all had to do with Donald Trump. Specifically, the 16 pages that were released now cover 3 additional FBI interview summaries with a woman who accused Trump of sexual abuse decades ago when she was a minor. And this seems to be the general thrust of what was removed here. Anything that might have to do with this. Now that these documents are published, there are still 37 pages of records missing from the public database, including notes from the interviews, a law enforcement report, and license records. Let's be clear, this White House cover-up is ongoing. Millions of pages still remain concealed from the public and our committee, said Sarah Guerrero, spokesperson for the Oversight Democrats. To be clear, there's a law in place signed by Donald Trump that is, every day that passes and these files aren't released is illegal. And again, when talking about the need for accountability as we go forward, there needs to be accountability for the flagrant disregard for the law that the Trump administration is displaying every day that they do not release these Epstein files. But, I think eventually we are going to start seeing some accountability here. And I say that because as of last week, House Oversight voted to subpoena Pam Bondi over why all these files are missing. Committee voted 24-19 on the resolution. Nancy Mace doing at least one thing in her life that isn't absolutely hateful and awful. Over 65,000 documents are missing, and we know there are more than 2,000 videos that are out there, Mace said. They're not giving Congress all the information, all the documents, and they're obfuscating. And I'd like to ask questions about that. We're still missing millions of documents. The 65,000 documents she's talking about are things that should have been released as part of the previous tranches of information, right? And so Pam Bondi is going to get gnomed. It would not surprise me. It would not surprise me. What exactly is the nature of the documents that have been released that seem to have been held back as a result of Donald Trump obfuscating and trying to stop this investigation that have to do with him sexually abusing a minor decades ago? Well, let's take a look again at this NPR piece The interview documents are part of more than 1,000 new pages published to the Epstein Files public database Thursday that also include what appears to be the complete case file from the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell initiated in 2006. The new documents go into more detail about the allegations made against both Trump and Epstein when the woman was between 13 to 15 years old. An FBI email summarizing the claims and a Justice Department PowerPoint slide deck note the woman claimed that around 1983, when she was around 13 years old, Epstein introduced her to Trump, who subsequently forced her head down to his exposed penis, which she subsequently bit. In response, Trump punched her in the head and kicked her out. In the newly published documents, the woman described how Trump allegedly put her head down and she bit the shit out of it. She alleged that Trump struck her and said something to the effect of, "Get this little bitch the hell out of here." The woman said she had 2 additional interactions with Trump, but asked to move on to another subject. It's unclear if she ever disclosed the details of those other interactions to law enforcement. During the 4th interview, and I do want to say, it is incredibly important that this woman underwent several rounds of interviews. Because the FBI doesn't just interview every tip that gets sent into them. They interview credible tips. And if they're interviewing someone multiple times, that indicates that they think that the witness is credible. All right? During the 4th interview the woman had with the FBI in 2019, when asked whether she felt comfortable detailing her contacts with Trump, she reportedly asked what the point would be of providing the information at this point in her life when there's a strong possibility nothing could be done about it. That's kind of where this ends, unless there are more documents. However, I did say that this is kinda where this ends, right? Because it's pretty great that we have local news journalists who are willing to go and put their nose to the grindstone and like grind out some journalism, frankly. So here is the Post and Courier, okay, which is a very respectable paper out of Charleston, South Carolina. And they put a really interesting piece out just a couple days ago titled Fuzzy Memories and Hard Facts, a South Carolina accuser's claims against Epstein, Trump examined. So let's take a look here, okay? A woman who claims she was abused as a minor by both Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump has given the FBI vivid accounts that includes aspects of her life corroborated by the Post and Courier through public records. Her alleged encounter with Trump, sometime around 1984, remains unproven, and the White House on March 7th said there's zero credible evidence that the woman's account is true. Using archived government records and news accounts, the Post and Courier found that the woman provided verifiable details to agents about her family background and its legal entanglements. She offered the name of an Epstein business associate on Hilton Head Island who became a central figure in the drama, with specifics that are reflected in the public records. The accounts describe an early phase in the mid-1980s of potential criminal conduct by Epstein that involved sexual activities with minors on Hilton Head. The alleged victim told the FBI she was under constant pressure from him to recruit more girls there to come party with him and his disgusting older friends. The incidents almost always involved drugs and alcohol and turned violent with hair pulling and beatings, according to the woman. Epstein went on to command a global sex trafficking ring that roped in hundreds of women, including many teenagers. He faced federal charges of sexually trafficking minors when he died in his federal prison cell in 2019. So, let's see here. A friend of hers also reported the allegations about Trump to the FBI in 2019. The Bureau cited her allegations in an email circulated within the agency and recently made public by the Justice Department. She asked that her friend be protected. Of the details that the Post and Courier found supported by public record, none related directly to the alleged victim's claims about Trump. The Post and Courier is not identifying the woman in keeping with its policy on sexual assault victims. The woman did not respond to messages seeking an interview, and her attorney, Lisa Bloom, a leading sexual assault lawyer, declined comment. So, they dug into this and are essentially able to verify that this person doesn't seem to be like crazy. They are giving actual details about themselves. And not only that, like painting her as a reasonable individual, which is an important thing in accounts like this. To identify key players in the woman's account and attempts to evaluate her claims, the newspaper scoured court records, police reports, and old newspaper clippings in multiple states. It also deployed a reporter to the West Coast to retrace her steps in a journey that began on a tiny resort island along the South Carolina coast. The alleged victim claimed that Epstein had business contacts in Hilton Head and lived temporarily on the island in 2 residences. One associate, she said, was a businessman in Ohio who took over a small real estate company on Hilton Head that hired her mother as a broker in the mid-1980s. The associate, who commuted to the island from the Cincinnati area, dated her mother as well, she said. Records show the woman's mother bought property in Hilton Head in 1981 for $55,000. At one point, her address was steps from Coligny Beach, one of the most popular oceanfronts for visitors to the island beaches. She moved often, records show. In local classified advertisements, the company employed her mother, marketed long-term rentals of homes and villas. It offered an array of lodging from a seaside cabin to a fully furnished locale at the Four Seasons Resort with access to jacuzzi, tennis, and handball courts. Her mom rented one home to financier Jeffrey Epstein, according to the alleged victim. She told federal agents that her mother advertised in a flyer that she, then 13, could provide babysitting services. Epstein, the woman said, summoned her to the house where he began his pattern of abuse. The Ohio associate who hired her mother also had sex with the teen several times and physically abused her, she told agents. She described him as a man with gray hair and big ears. She told agents she believed he was unaffiliated with the Cincinnati-based college. The Post and Courier confirmed that he was a board member of the for-profit school. So, just to be clear, the Post and Courier is able to corroborate that the people that she is alleging abused her did exist and were in the area at the time and aren't just like made up people. Like, they're real people and are able to verify like their proximity to her. Local newspaper accounts from the time described problems with drug use among the young who were hanging out on Hilton Head's beaches. The alleged victim and Epstein, who provided marijuana, cocaine, and pills to her and others, brought fat older women to a pool gathering at a resort hotel. She only recalled encountering Epstein once in a non-sexual situation, telling agents she bumped into him at a Rick James concert in Savannah, Georgia, when she was around age 15. She said he got her drunk. Newspaper records show the Super Freak musician performed regularly in the Savannah area at the time. Again, this seems pretty verified in a number of different ways here. At one point, her mother became aware that Epstein had nude photos of the teen from their sexual encounters and was demanding money to keep them hidden, the woman told the FBI. The victim said she had seen the photographs in his bedstand, leading to a violent encounter when he discovered her snooping. She said his extortion demand caused her mother to steal funds from her real estate company. Epstein had departed investment and trading company Bear Stearns in 1981 after an internal investigation of his trading practices. Around the time of the allegations, he was operating a company he founded in New York. Epstein worked as a troubleshooter for wealthy clients, advising them on issues like corporate embezzlement and offering investment strategies. The alleged victim and her mother said her mother's boss, the Epstein associate from Ohio, and his company accountant helped the mother fix the books so she could pay off Epstein. The alleged victim told agents that the episode was so stressful her mother began drinking again. Her mother later went to prison near Columbia, the woman told agents. Records confirmed that her mother was implicated in such a crime around this time. Other documents show the mother's boss at the real estate firm sought criminal charges against the mother the following year. She was accused of stealing $22,000 from the escrow account, the same escrow account that was fixed so that she could pay off Epstein. One, I'm going to link you all this article because holy shit, what excellent journalism. We aren't even all the way through this, okay? But like, it gets a lot worse. There are a lot of sections for this article, but this one is a doozy. Years after the events on Hilton Head, the woman said both she and her mother felt that Epstein was tracking their movements. Both faced suspicious calls and frightening incidents. In addition to detailing her abuse at Epstein's hands, the woman offered vague details across 3 interviews about her encounter with Trump. She said the incident occurred when he was a leading developer with a new casino in Atlantic City. She said she was led to Trump in a very tall building with huge rooms. The future president instructed others to leave the room, she said, and allegedly told her, "Let me teach you how little girls are supposed to be." She said he unzipped his pants and forced her to perform a sex act. The alleged victim told the FBI she bit the shit out of it, causing Trump to slap her across the face and curse at her. It's unclear from the interview records how long she stayed in the New York area, but she had family connections in the state. In her talks with the FBI, the woman also detailed calls to her mother at an assisted living facility on the West Coast, where both of them had settled. The Post and Courier verified that the mother used a private nursing care home as an address in her declining years. A death record matches the mother's age and name, but Washington State does not publicly release other identifying details. It is common for sexual trauma victims to have trouble recollecting specifics of abusive incidents, according to experts. The FBI recognized this during its decades-long Epstein investigation and provided free counseling services to victims. One agent involved in the woman's interviews with the FBI was a psychologist trained in victim trauma. Critical elements of the woman's story are difficult to verify without the ability to call witnesses, conduct sworn interviews, and subpoena financial records. It's unclear whether the FBI attempted such an investigation. The woman repeatedly told FBI agents she believed it served no purpose to tell her story because the events occurred so long ago. Trump had also been elected president in 2016. She informed agents in August of 2019 that she wanted to show them she had sued Epstein's estate in case it posed a conflict with their investigation. In a statement to the Post and Courier, Trump's press secretary Caroline Leavitt called the allegations baseless accusations from decades ago that are backed by zero evidence or facts. She described the alleged victim as a sadly disturbed woman who has an extensive criminal history. Like, her life got destroyed by this stuff. You know? Like, her life, her mother's life got absolutely destroyed. While we can't directly verify a lot of this story, or the specific assaults that occurred in this story, we can verify all of the surrounding details. And the surrounding details all seem to match up with her claims. I gotta say, guys, I believe her. I believe her. I think the current president of the United States tried to rape a 15-year-old girl. And I believe that Jeffrey Epstein raped her and then extorted her family with nude photographs. Because this sounds exactly like how Jeffrey Epstein operated. It sounds exactly like how Donald Trump operates. And like, it's really sad. I hope she's okay. For the record, she is not okay. She is not okay at all. Like, she got hooked on drugs. She has been in and out of prison. She's been married several times. And like, when the Post and Courier reached out to her, she described her life as having been permanently scarred by her experience with Epstein. You know, this is again the disgusting truth at the bottom of all. Like, I think a lot of people, it's easy to fall into thinking of the Epstein files as like this nebulous, ambiguous thing. But at the root of it all comes down to this. It all comes down to, actual living, breathing teenage girls being abused by some of the most powerful men on the planet. Yeah, it is vile wickedness is what it is. I just gotta say, I think that the walls are closing in for Donald Trump on this one. Because Republicans and the DOJ are slow walking this for a reason. And I do not imagine that reason is for shits and giggles. I do not imagine that reason is just pure incompetence. I feel like they know that there is something coming down the pipeline, that they are trying to trickle and drip and delay. I think that there are some Republicans who are able to understand what is coming. And, well, House lawmakers are heading for the exit at the fastest rate in decades. And I'm not saying that's solely because of the Epstein files, but I am saying they are able to understand that the situation is completely politically unsurvivable, which is why they're leaving. Like, they are getting out of Dodge before before it all gets fucked. Yeah, I do think they are slow walking this so that they can get past the midterms, but like, I don't think it's gonna save them. I don't think it's gonna save them. So all that being said, I highly encourage you all. I'm gonna link it one more time. Read this piece by the Post and Courier. It is very, very important journalism. Share it far and wide if you can. It's really good stuff. All that being said, folks, hit the like button if you got anything out of this. Subscribe and leave a comment. Longer than 8 words. It really helps in the algorithm. I know this isn't like the most hope-filled story out there, but there are a lot of interesting connections going on here between Epstein, Russia, Israel, and countless people getting hurt as a result. And so far, we have seen precious little justice. And again, the future of any kind of political movement in a positive direction here in America needs to be built on a foundation of accountability and justice. And we should start with justice for the Epstein victims. So if you want to push for that, you need to organize. You need to organize. And we need folks to show up for their local Dems. We need folks to show up for your local DSA. We need people to show up to organize, to radicalize your local Democrats towards more progressive ideas and values, and push out those corporate Democrats who are bought and paid for. Push out the conservative Democrats who are trying to compromise every, positive maneuver that we could make as a nation. We have to defeat them on the local level before we defeat them on the national level. And the name of the game is showing up on the local level. So show up. And then we also need folks to show up at their local DSA, because we need DSA to be more effective. We need that, especially in the short term, as we try to counteract the destruction and, stonewalling of corporate Democrats. Okay? We need people to organize in both. If you need help getting started, join our Discord, reach out to GamerG for help with your DSA, reach out to Dragonfly for help with your local Dems, and do consider, if you are uninterested in Discord, coming over to riverboat.gg when I'm live and talking with GamerG and Dragonfly over there, because both of them are there and willing to talk with you about how best to get involved and how best to talk with folks in your local area to pursue the goals of more progressive and left-wing ideas taking hold in your community. And all that being said, last but not least, check out ImogeneOlivia.com. Gender euphoric lingerie designed from the ground up for trans femmes. Link down in the description. Let's keep on going.
Riverboat Jack is coming to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube and swishy streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, Bane, and plenty more. Your sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord. Riverboat Jack.